So if you're going to play along with me, you just need some sort of object. I'm going to be using this cup, and we're going to look at a couple of different ways to approach it. Okay, so I'll turn on the overhead camera and I'll spotlight my video and we'll just go ahead and get started. So, okay, so this is my object, and you could use any paper for this that you wanted. I'm just using this little paint cup to prop it up so that it doesn't, otherwise the handle flops down like that. Okay, so you could use any kind of paper, sketchbook, anything like that. This is my under paper that I've had on my desk for a little while, and I'm just going to draw directly on that because this is more of an exercise than anything sort of perfect. Okay, and it's always a good reminder when you use sort of bad paper about that. Okay, so I'm taking a colored pencil, but you could use anything. And the first step is just to think about what does this object sort of basically look like? So again, I don't care about anything that's sort of already on my paper. I'm just sort of, I see a little bit of an oval. I see kind of a curve here. I see another curve here. And then it sort of flares out here at the bottom. Well, let me let some more people in who are coming in. Okay, then there's kind of like a handle that goes like this, and that kind of looks like a cup. I don't know that it looks like this cup, but that's totally fine. That's not the point of it. It's just thinking about, what is kind of the basic shapes here. Then oftentimes what I like to do is after I've used a colored pencil, I might switch to a different material. So here is just a regular, this is a varsity pen, and it has a kind of like nib tip. This is one of my favorite pens to take with me places to draw with. But again, I'm just gonna take a minute, you know, some more people are coming in, so I'm just admitting everybody. I usually start right on time, which can be a blessing and a curse. Okay, so again, I'm just sort of doodling through my object on my under paper. I'm not really thinking too hard about it or worrying about it too much. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't even need to look like the object. I'm just trying to get a sense of the shapes that are there. Now, the fun thing about the Varsity pen is that it runs with water, which is not fun if you do it accidentally, but it is fun if you do it on purpose, right? So it runs with water. You can see that. It's a pen. This is one of the reasons that I like to have it in my sketch bag because it's such a good pen for just being able to play around with. So, it's always good to know the water solubility of your art supplies because then you can play with it. And for those who have just come in, I see there's a couple of you, we're just playing around with our object and looking at different ways to draw it. So you could put it in a way that totally makes no sense. Do you know what I mean? That isn't like a realistic way that you might look at that object. And this time I'm going to use a Listo China marker. And what do I see? I see a little circle in the center, then I see a sort of bigger circle here, then I see the circle gets kind of interrupted here with this handle, and then, you know what I mean? It's like sort of a narrower on top and then kind of gets wider at the bottom. And again, I'm not going for accuracy at all. I'm just exploring different materials, different ideas, different ways to look at it. So I could do the same thing like this, looking down into it. We can stick with the China marker and I can say, okay, it's a circle. And then it has like a little handle like that. Okay. Just playing with different shapes, different ideas, again, different materials. Different materials are always going to change how you're looking at it. That's why the supply list was so random for this. So this is a permapaque marker. Okay. And permapaque markers come in different types. I like these dual tip ones because they have this side has a chisel tip, so you get a nice sort of wide line with that. And then this side has a bullet tip, so you get a nice thin line with it. But again, you could use any marker. So if I wanted to draw even just this same thing here, but with the marker, I might do like, okay, I'm seeing like a thin thing here. There is kind of a ring on the inside. I can kind of see right in there. And then maybe for the handle, instead of drawing it like that, I'll make it actually like a thing that kind of sticks out. You know, I can prop it up again with my little paint container and look at it a different way, or I can let it fall and now see what I see because now the handle's basically disappeared behind it. So let's use a different material again. So this is a different kind of marker. This is a Uni Posca. This is a paint pen, which you have to shake up. I know I'm moving through this fast, but the point is to not get too attached or too precious with this. You're literally just playing with this. You're literally just thinking of this as like, you know, what kind of mess can I make today? So I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, it kind of looks like this. It kind of goes like that. It kind of goes like this. It kind of goes like this. Maybe I see a hint of that tiny little handle like this, but that's the basics of it. Is this a good drawing? No. But that's kind of the point, is we're not trying to make a good drawing. We're just trying to think of like all the different ways that we can look at this object in order to take these shapes and ideas kind of elsewhere, right? Okay, so now I can get down into something maybe painting. So I have some black paint here. I'm going to put it onto my palette paper. I'm going to take a small brush. And I'm just gonna say, like, what does this look like? Okay, it looks like, and maybe I fill it in. This is what it kind of looks like to me. Okay, maybe I feel like that brush is too small. What happens if we use a really big brush to do this? How I'm running out of room, and it's okay if things overlap. But so maybe then I take my paint and I say, okay, now I'm gonna look at my cup, and now it looks like this, and it kind of has this curve. And it comes in again. I sort of ran out of paint and it comes across like that. And then it's got kind of a handly thing happening there. This is an interesting like shadow of a cup. Great. What else can I use and muck around with? I have some crayons. These are Neocolor ones, meaning they are not water soluble. So I can take a Neocolor one, and I can again like move my cup, change the orientation. Maybe I make the opening so that I see more of the opening here. You know, if you were using a box or a plant or anything else, you could just kind of play around with how you're looking at it. And then it comes down like this, and then it kind of goes up like that. Okay, so then that's the opening, and this is the handle, and it kind of goes something like that. Okay. Now, I couldn't find my new color 2 crayons this morning when I was looking for them. So I'm using scribble sticks, which are also a water-soluble crayon. You could also use Inktense pencils, lots of different choices in the water-soluble sort of category here. So let's see if what I can get out of this container. Again, I can look at my object and I can say, okay, kind of like this, kind of like this, kind of like this, kind of like that, kind of like that. And then because it's water soluble, I can kind of scribble a little bit. And then let's mix some colors too. I like color mixing. So let's just throw a little bit of a different color in there. And then let's make sure all the paint is out of my brush. I previously used black paint with this brush, so it might be a little bit clouded by that. It is a little bit, but not bad. And then I can sort of run around here like this. And then another thing that's always fun about water-soluble crayons is that you can draw into the wet with the dry crayon. Especially depends on the paper that you have, but to get some more color in there too. Okay. So it has been 10 minutes since class started. And I have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different drawings using 9 different media, because I think these are both China marker. You know, it doesn't take a lot to play around. And you don't have to just look at, we're looking at sort of the silhouette of it. This cup has a pattern that I painted on here many, many years ago. And, you can take the time then to maybe explore the pattern a little bit. So let's grab a ballpoint pen. And I can play with the pattern on one of the cups if I want. So there's sort of like a diamond and another diamond and another diamond. And then it goes triangle, triangle, out triangle, 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 double triangle, 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 sort of outy triangle, 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 double triangle, right? And that's kind of cool, which we can play with on the cup here. I've made them too close together, but again, the point is not accuracy. The point is to be exploring and playing with your materials. I think a lot of times people get very caught up in results. I do. So I wouldn't be surprised if you do too. But the problem with getting caught up in results is it's very hard to ever be satisfied. And you often feel in the middle or the beginning of a project that you've already failed, right? Because it doesn't look good right now, which must mean it therefore is bad. But that's just simply not the way that it goes. I think that it takes time, and that I always tell people, if it looks good right now, then you're done with it. If it's, looks bad, then guess what? You still have work to do, and that's exciting. So now I'm just drawing the pattern independently of the cup as its own kind of object here, right? Just looking at that sort of by itself. I can also be inspired, to take, I use a Sharpie, by the way, for that. I can also be inspired then to take some of the colors from here and color it in. So let's see, this is kind of like orange in the center. And let's see, there's brown on the outside. Brown gets a bad rap, but it's a really good neutral. Is that brown? That looks like a very dark brown. I don't like that brown. Let's see if I've got another different color brown. There you go. That's warmer. That other brown was very cold. It almost felt black. So I'm using color pencils with my Sharpie. This is how we get into mixed media. And I think if you're a person who is interested in mixed media and you want to be a mixed media artist or it is something that you already are, I think that you have to feel comfortable using a wide range of different kind of tools. Okay. So what else can we play with to sort of look at this cup? Well, I have some collage paper here, and I thought it might be fun. Let's try to cut out what I see. So I have a big honkin' pair of scissors. And again, I'm just going to look at, like, what do I see? Well, I feel like I see kind of it goes in and then it goes out. And then it kind of, if you assume that the lip is there, and then it goes in, and then it goes out, and the out is probably shorter than I've made it here, and it also curves a little bit, so I'm gonna snip that, throw these back into my bin of scraps. Okay, and now I have this shape. So I'm gonna go ahead and glue that down into this mess. And there's lots of different glues you can use. You could use a glue stick. That's great because you don't have to have any drying time. This paper is heavier. It's like a cardstock, so I would not use a thin matte medium. I would use a heavier soft gel matte because you want to match the weight of the paper that you're gluing to the weight of the gel medium. But for the sake of quick and easy, we're going to use a Yoo-Hoo glue stick. And if I may talk to you for just a moment about glue sticks, I do not like any glue stick other than Yoo-Hoo because I find most of the other ones don't actually stick and they dry out before you even get to them. So Yoo-Hoo is definitely my favorite brand. Okay, so now we have this collage version of it here. I could play around also with some of this pattern. Maybe we could collage a little bit of that. So I'm thinking, do I need it to be the same colors? Probably not, right? Why stick to the same colors? So a great example of stuff that's in my collage bin is like this is a print that I made that I didn't particularly like. But you know what? When we cut it up, it'll be great. So I basically need a square. So I'm going to cut a square of this. And now I have a really cool patterned square, right? And then I need to be able to cut sort of this shape around it. So maybe, maybe I'll use a book page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this square to the book page so that I can cut the pattern around it. And I could cut individual triangles or I can cut it sort of all at once. Now you'll also notice my glue stick technique where I'm pushing the paper onto the glue stick instead of the other way around. Okay, so I've glued this into the center here. And now I'm going to cut this pattern. So it goes straight up and then it goes triangle, triangle, sticky outy triangle, sticky outy triangle. One thing I want you to notice is I didn't collage at the beginning. I would not be able to cut these shapes or do this if I hadn't drawn it first. Even if you don't think that you can draw, it's not about realism, but it's about getting a feel for the shapes and the ideas, being able to, at least notate what something looks like in general shape terms is extremely useful for any artist and all artists, even if you're a super abstract artist because it just informs you about shapes and what you're looking at and what's important. We did an entire cycle at my art practice on drawing, and I think it was really important, even though there are lots of people there who don't draw representationally. But here's my little pattern swatch, and I could put it with this other piece. I can put it somewhere separate because, again, this is not a composition, so you can also just find a big empty space for it. So I'm going to go ahead and roll up my glue stick, get some glue on there. One tip that I do is sometimes I'll take palette paper and I'll do my glue stick on there. That way the excess glue ends up on the palette and not all over the surface that I am going on. Okay, so here is a pattern piece. And maybe we'll just turn this for fun because why should everything be going in the same direction? Right? Okay, so another 10 minutes have passed. And now we have branched into a couple other things. We've been playing with pattern. We have been playing with cutting out some shapes. Let's see if I can cut out a couple different versions of this cup at different angles to get some more dynamic shapes going. So I'm just looking for rooting around in my collage bin for some papers that might be fun to cut up and see. This is an envelope. It was an envelope that said Julie, but this is the inside lining of it, and I decided to keep it because I like the paper, so that might be fun to cut into a kind of cup shape that I see here. I'm not sure I left enough room for the handle, but you know what? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it and not worry too much about it. Okay, something like this, and then I need to get the inside out. I think angle is a little bit drastic. So if I need to get the inside out, I'm going to use a craft knife. And I really should put a cutting mat underneath, but I don't have a cutting mat right at my fingertips. So I'm just going to do it on top of my palette paper so I don't cut through my table. But basically, I just want to cut out the handle here. So I'm pushing pretty lightly with my craft knife since I don't actually have a real cutting mat. And there you go. I didn't even cut through the palette paper, I don't think. Famous last words. Okay, I did have a lid. Oh, I put it on the back. There you go. Okay, so now I have another one, and I feel a little bit like you can't see it against the white paper. It totally disappears, right? So I think what I'll do is I'll just mount it onto something you can see it on. There you go. And boop, boop, boop. Then I'll just cut that out because why not? Doop, 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 doop. And we'll glue that down. So, art for me is a very iterative process. And what I mean by that is you just keep going and going and going and going. One idea bounces to the next. Okay. You just keep playing and going and seeing where it takes you. So, now what I'm looking for is empty space. How much empty space do I have on this paper? Well, this looks empty. I could probably get a little something in here, maybe get a pattern over there. This is empty but small. So I'm going to try to put some more things into empty space. So let's do another upside down cup. And this time I think I will use, this is a brush marker. This is a koi coloring brush. And these are also water soluble. So I'm going to do just a circle. And then it goes, oh, I want to change colors. I want to change color. So I don't think I have another koi coloring brush here. So I'm just going to use a water soluble crayon. And again, this is a pretty perfect circle around here. Boop a doop a doop a doop a doop a doo. And then the handle, I think, should be yellow again because the bottom was white. We'll keep some consistency. It's okay if these overlap. Something like that. And then let's take some water into it and just see what happens. I hope you can see that this is a very low stakes way. Oh, my water's black. So there you go. Now it's got a little bit of a shadow. It's a more sophisticated color because it's mixed with a dark. Okay, this ended up homogenizing the color a bit, but there's another version, another try. And now we're again like mixing our media, which is the goal. I really like this green color that's on here, this sort of tealy color. So another thing you can do when you have an object is just see like, can I color mix to get that color? So I'm going to say it probably has a green base. So we'll start with a little bit of green. And then I'm going to say it probably has some blue, but not like an intense blue. So maybe I'll start with a little cobalt. And then let's get a palette knife here and see what we can do. Too green, right? It doesn't, this is much more turquoise. So it needs maybe a stronger blue. So let's put in a hint. I'm looking for my phthalo, which is very strong. There we go. This is my phthalo blue green shade. I'm using golden fluid acrylics here. You could use any acrylic paints you like, although I will just say this caveat, which is I think that while they're more expensive, the golden paints really just are so, the pigmentation is just beautiful and intense. Look at that. What a pretty green. I think it's closer, but it needs some white. So anybody who took my practical colors for painters class knows that this is actually, if you've never color mixed, very intimidating. Once you start color mixing, pretty easy, pretty shockingly easy. Okay, so we're gonna put some white in, and I'm not gonna do it to the whole pile. I'm just gonna do it to part of it. Ooh, it's looking pretty close. This is a little bit lighter, so that's why I didn't mix the whole pile, because now I can see if I can get it a little bit darker by mixing in more of this. Closer, closer. It's looking pretty close. Let's see. Should we test how we did? Should I put some paint right on my cup? Should I do it? Let's do it. So it's a little bit darker, it looks like, but it's pretty close. So I could put in a little more white, and that should get it pretty close. So I'm just going to take a little bit from here and see if that's the right amount. Okay, let's do it again. Did I get it? Oh, looks like it needs a little more yellow, interestingly. So let's go ahead. Oh, this wipe is dirty. It's just smearing the paint around. There you go. So let's go ahead and grab a little bit of yellow. I am going to use this, I'm going to pronounce this terribly, but it's the benzimidazolone yellow medium. And I'm going to put just a little bit over here and we'll mix it in and see if that yellow helps get it where we want it to go. That looks pretty good. I might put just the tiniest little scrape of more yellow in. Okay, let's test it again. What do you think? Does it still need to get lighter? What do you think? Or is it pretty spot on? I might add the tiniest bit more white and see if that gets us there. Let's find out. You have to make those noises when you move paint around. I think it's actually required by law. So just so you know, these things are important. Okay. That looks pretty good, pretty close. It's getting pretty seamless on the cup, right? So I think we're pretty close. I think we've done it. So this is now something I can paint with. So let's see what I want to, what do I want to paint with it? How about, oh, I could use the palette knife. The palette knife is another tool that we can use that we haven't used yet. So how about if we do a little, let's look at the cup like that and say, okay, and then a little chunky down like so. Can I see the handle? I don't think so. And then maybe scrape it to give the line a little bit of sgraffito. Or I could even take a little bit from here and just, since it's a slightly different color, just make it a little more textured. Okay, cool. Okay, this is getting very filled up. It's looking really good. Lots of information, lots of exploration, lots of trying. You could definitely label things if you wanted to figure out what they were. But I'm going to show you the next step where what we do is we're going to take all these sketches and we're going to kind of see what else they can be, right? We're going to figure out how in capturing all of this we did that. Okay, but I'm going to give you a minute to keep going because I know I moved super fast through all of that. And plus, I need this paint to dry. So while I am doing all that and letting you guys chill, I am going and letting you guys chill. Well, you're not chilling, you're probably working very hard to get everything done. So while all of that is happening, I'm going to show you a quick PowerPoint and then we'll get to the end of this, okay? So let me share my PowerPoint. Okay, so if you're not sure who I am, my name is Julie Fei-Fan Balzer. It's very nice to meet you. Fei-Fan is Chinese because my mom's Chinese, and I've been told that it means unique. It is my middle name, not my maiden name. Okay, so I make a lot of different work. Some of it is representational, like the 6 different pieces, I guess 7 that you see here. Okay. A lot of my work is inspired by nature. It's something that I am very inspired by, that I enjoy. I do a lot of flowers and trees and all that kind of stuff, leaves, but it all tends to be vaguely abstract. Speaking of which, I also do a lot of purely abstract work. And I think that representational work always influences your abstract work because I still, for me, definitely see a strong nature influence in all of the work that you see here. Um, I love art techniques. And that's the whole reason that I decided to have this Zoom today on World Art Day, is just because I love art techniques and I'm opening up a new part of my art practice that I wanted to talk about. And so here you can see just a bunch of different techniques that I use very regularly in my work: layered monotypes, gelatin printing with stencils, making collage paper, color mixing, stitching on paper, hand cutting, stamping, drawing, and it goes on and on. If you're like me and you're a technique junkie, you know how this goes. Okay, so here's some bona fides. So for about 15 years, I did a ton of TV. I hosted two different TV shows on PBS. I hosted a cable show for Cloth Paper Scissors magazine. I did Home Shopping Network, lots of stuff like that. I wrote a book called Carve Stamp Play, which I'm sure many of you might have, because from many Carve Decembers, I've been published in a ton of magazines. This is the happens to be a month. The picture with my mouth open. My mother once said, "There's not a single picture of me on the internet without my mouth open." So take that as you will. Where I was published in all those magazines, and you can see my work on the cover there of Cloth Paper Scissors magazine. I regularly show my work around Boston, and I've won several different prizes over the years, juror awards, first prize ribbons, all that kind of stuff. I regularly sell my artwork. You can see my husband Steve as a sort of a casual Santa Claus in one of the booths that I've had right there. Lots of earrings and art and all sorts of stuff get sold. And I've been teaching for about 20 years, which sounds crazy to me, but I'm old now. So I can't believe it. I've been teaching for 20 years. And I teach in person and online and all that stuff. And all of that is to say, this is the map or My Art Practice Technique Vault. So the My Art Practice monthly membership is a lot about your art practice and focused on all sorts of things from art history to sort of deeper dives into composition and sort of big picture thinking about how to keep up with a regular practice. And a lot of people, there's so much content. It comes out every Monday and Thursday, and that's overwhelming for some people. And people kept saying, isn't there any way to like make there be less? Make it be less overwhelming, et cetera, and to really focus on art techniques. So, ta-da! You ask and I give. So the Mac Technique Vault is a monthly membership offering various art lessons across 5 categories. So you will get access to Creativity Sparks, which are short lessons meant to spark an idea in you. They're a great resource for when you're feeling stuck, blocked, or simply uninspired. There's some examples here. You can see the first one is how to make these strip fabric containers. Another one that's more practical, I guess, on stretching a canvas, how to do it. There's a technique for layered monotypes using magazines. So there are magazine transfers on the gelatin plate. There's a paint transfer method. There are 6 collages inspired by an object. And then again, scrap paper tape. So you can see it's wide ranging, different kinds of stuff. Then you'll also get access, oops, PowerPoint, what are you doing to me? Then you'll also get access to studio vlogs, which there are really an over-the-shoulder peek at life as a working artist. They focus on process, struggle, often failure, overcoming perfectionism, which I still need to do, and sometimes the business of art. So again, you can say sometimes there are experiments, like I went down a rabbit hole with Ching Collet monoprints, talking about setting up art fairs, talking about starting the 100-day project, showing how I'm adding flowers into a painting, going through the process of making some big paper vases that I made. There's an art journaling one. There's just lots of different choices here. Then you get access to art techniques. So these are straightforward how-to lessons. The focus is definitely on techniques for mixed media artists. It's usually collage, printmaking, and painting, along with some fiber and some drawing and a couple other things sort of along the way. And again, you can see here, like for color mixing, there's one lesson on creating neutrals. There's thin paper staining, embossing powder skins, faux hand-dyed fabric, aluminum tape texture plate for printmaking, what to do with your dirty paint water, lots of different choices there. And if you talk about art techniques, you have to talk about art materials. So art materials lessons are a deep dive into a single art material. So recently we've covered the Lyra water-soluble graphite crayons, iridescent paints, the Terns Burton pens, all about alcohol inks, my favorite adhesives, understanding acrylic paint viscosity, but it's really deep diving into an art supply. So instead of what we're doing today, where we're sort of like jumping supply to supply, you stay with one supply for the whole lesson. And then you get the Q&A live streams. So there's one Q&A every cycle at my art practice, which is approximately every 3 months. So if you happen to be a member during the period when the live is, you can go to that. But otherwise, you have access to the entire vault of replays. And there are so many topics that we have covered. But the Q&As are a chance to ask any art-related question you want and have it answered. I mean, to the best of my ability, obviously. So this is just $23 a month. You can join anytime and you can cancel anytime. It's a fantastic deal. Um, and because here's what you get. So you get immediate access to more than 200 existing lessons. I think there are 224 in the vault at the moment and increasing all the time because each month you're going to, you're a member, you get an additional 1 to 2 lessons. And then the sweetest of all, you're going to get special discount codes for other classes and other things that you might be interested in. And then my one-time offer today is if you join today or tomorrow, so before Friday, April 17th, I wanted to give the people watching the replay a little time. You will pay just $1.25 for the Brayer monotypes class, which is a $125 value. So it's a 99% discount. This is the Brayer monotype class, which is a super cool class, and you will get lifetime access to that. So even if you cancel your membership after a month, you'll still get the class for $1.25, but you have to sign up before Friday, and I'll email those codes on Saturday once I see whoever signs up. So that is my PowerPoint. So hopefully everybody is caught up. Do let me know in the comments if you have any questions about that. But if we're ready to get back to what we're doing, then let me go ahead and put the overhead camera back on. Okay, this paint is almost dry. I'm actually going to hit this with a heat gun because the palette knife puts the paint on pretty thick. So this is staying a little bit wet. And if that doesn't work, I got more tricks up my sleeve. Let's see. I just don't want to put my arm in the middle of this while it's soaking wet. Let's do this. So I often do this when I want to speed up drying, which is I just take a piece of deli paper or something else. It could be any paper. I just like deli paper. And I smush it. And see how it takes off a lot of the excess paint? So you just kind of need to keep finding a clean area and lifting it. And obviously, if you use a more absorbent paper, it comes away kind of faster than it does when you use deli paper, which is not that absorbent. But pretty good, I'd say. I might take, this is a piece of copy paper, and this is pretty absorbent. So let's see if we can get the last of this up. And a little monoprint there, I guess you could call it. But I think that's going to be dry enough. You can see that deli paper is porous because the paint came right through onto my hand. Okay, so now that I have all of these things, what am I going to do with them? Oh, I'm so glad that you asked. Now it's time to go back and see what we can do to add more, make them more interesting, see what we can do to make them, kind of cooler, for lack of a better word. So let's start with this one because it's an easy one to start with because it already looks like a coloring book illustration. And we've already gone back to it once before as well, right? So I have my basic outline and then I've drawn this design on it. I am now disassociating from this cup. I'm throwing the cup away. Well, I'm not throwing the cup away, but I'm not worried about the actual cup anymore. Now I'm more concerned about what I can see here. So I could start by, let's just color some of this in. So I could take this paint that's here and just start to see like what happens if we, start to add to it. So now we have 3 different media that are already here. Not that it matters, not that you're supposed to, like, there's a certain number you're supposed to use, but just because it's amazing how fast it stacks up. Okay. I'm just rinsing my brush because I want the other side to be a little bit thinner, more watered down, more watercolory, because everything is an opportunity for experimentation. And I'm not too worried about painting in the lines. I hope you can see that. It didn't really paint in the lines. But now you can see I've gotten a lighter value on the left and a darker value on the right. It already looks more interesting, which is cool. So we can wait for the rest of this to dry, or I might go into this yellow paint. You can see it's pretty watery. I have a very wet brush and just hit the insides here with the yellow so that everything's going to kind of dry up at the same time. Okay. Now I could use my drying method here because this is fairly absorbent. And that does take off the excess wet paint pretty successfully so that these look pretty dry. So now I could go in with something else. Let's say, what about crayons? Crayons are one of my favorite things to use. So I'm thinking color wise, should we go with maybe a dark blue? I think that would look really cool. So I'm just going to start coloring. And getting the dark blue's getting a little bit lost, I have to say, against that sort of teal color that we made. And again, my coloring is not exactly like amazing coloring, and that's fine. But I don't mind it. Makes the pattern kind of subtle in an interesting way. When something turns out in a way different than what you expected, I think what your goal should be is not to immediately be like, oh no, it didn't turn out how I expected. I think that your goal should be to say, okay, that's not what I expected or how I wanted it to be, but do I like it or do I hate it? And if you hate it, then you can do something about it. And if you like it, then you've learned something. And I like this. I think this is more subtle than I intended, and I like it. Okay, so this has been all filled in. Does that mean that it's the end? It doesn't have to be. You can now play around. Like, do you want this to have a handle and you wish that it did? Well, you are the boss of what happens here. So if this cup feels like it needs a handle, you can just throw a handle on, and it doesn't have to be the actual handle, that it has. And if you wish that that handle were colored, you can go back to your paint, or here I'm just going to use a crayon in a slightly different color to get that handle going, right? And now I have kind of a wonky and interesting cup. And I could say, I feel like even though it didn't actually look like this, for it to read better as a cup, I want it to have a kind of opening here. So now I need to paint that in with some white paint. Let's see, let's see if I can. There you go. I was looking for a brush that was a little bit more flatter instead of a round. I found a filbert, which is great. Okay, so now there's that. And let's say I don't like that color. It's too white. Well, no problem. White plays nice with every other color. So maybe I want it to be more kind of yellow. So I've got this transparent iron oxide, which I'm going to throw out onto my palette paper, right into the wet white paint. I'm going to go ahead and get that. And then maybe I want it to have a little bit of texture. So just scrape into it a tiny bit around the rim so that you can really see that edge. But the whole point here is just to play. And I'm using my little scraps of paper to brush off, and it will later become, ta-da, collage paper, right? So that it's constant cycle in art making. Okay, so now I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, well, I can tackle this little cup. And let's see how I want to tackle that. Maybe I want to go with something that's a really shocking color. Let's go with this fluorescent red. And let's see how it wants to interact here. Kind of interesting. And then, you know, I like this fluorescent red so much, maybe I will put it also here. So through this process, you're learning a lot. You're learning about how different materials interact and react. You're learning about how different colors interact and react. You're learning like what makes something work for you versus what doesn't. So here's a good opportunity if this is totally dry, because you never want to use a paint marker on something that's not totally dry. This is a Posca marker. We used the black one before. So I'm trying to shake this one up. I can't hear anything. Sometimes when they're stored for a while, you need to really whack it around in order to hear the little ball in it shaking. And this one's been sitting for a while. So let's see. Let's test it, shall we? Oh, looks like it's running fine. Okay. So maybe I want to do like a really delicate floral pattern on here. So I can take my time, and play with how that might look. Mm. Because that turns it into a totally different kind of cup. This seems more like something that might work for like a Japanese tea service as opposed to the kind of Southwestern feel of the other one. And you're, helping to yourself to learn again about like, well, how does the Posca marker look over paint? How does it look, how did this paint go over the water soluble materials? Is any of that color bleeding through? You're always trying to I liken art making to science all the time because I really do think you're a scientist in a lot of ways when you're an artist constantly trying experiments to see what will happen. And then maybe it needs a couple dots. This Posca marker looks like it still needs to be shaken up. This white's pretty watery. Pretty cool. Okay, so that's another one that I think is kind of interesting and quirky and cool. So let's see, this one is kind of a real shadow. It strikes me that it might be fun to do some transparent collage with that. And what I mean, or translucent really. And what I mean is, so here I have some collage paper that has white on it, but anywhere where the white isn't is going to go more transparent. So I've just hacked out a little piece because you don't need to cover the whole thing. And now we are going to use gel medium. I'm going to bring my palette back, but not put it in anything wet. This is always the problem with trying to get everything in the camera. And I'm going to put that's a generous amount of gel medium. And I'm going to use this silicone paintbrush to apply it. I love to use this for gel medium because the cleaning is so easy. You just wipe them off or peel it off if it dries. Then I'm just going to pick it up and throw it down on there. It doesn't matter if it doesn't really line up. Skate it right on top. And actually the gel medium is kind of now setting that water soluble pen that's underneath, which is nice. But there you go. Now it has a little more texture in it, which is kind of cool. And I can add some additional, let's see, this is some spotted deli paper that has, again, some areas that are very translucent. So ripping will always lead to a much softer line than cutting. So if you want something to be hard, like maybe I want a hard edge here, but I want the rest to be soft, then you cut, then that notch is really clear, right? So let's bring this back for gluing. Now I decant my matte medium into this. This is a Wilton's cake decorating bottle, but I find it much easier to use than the containers that it comes in. So just remember that just because something comes a certain way doesn't mean you have to use it that way or you have to accept that that's what it is. You can customize it. You can make changes. You can do what you want. You are in charge of you. So now this is becoming really kind of soft and interesting to me. I like what's going on there. I think I'm going to leave it alone. I like it just like that. So this is a big open shape. And to me, this cries out for a stencil. What can we put on here that would be kind of fun? Maybe a big flower. Sometimes I like the idea of putting big shapes in small spaces. I think it's kind of a really cool thing. So I am going to use a little bit of tape just to hold this in place here. And I'm going to get a cosmetic wedge sponge on the bottom of my pile where it's buried. Now, this is also a process that you could do over several days. Like maybe the first day is some quick things, and then you come back the next day and see what you can add or take away, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so on my palette, I think let's put out, how about some red? I'll put it near that bright red. I have got some yellow out here too already, which I think is a nice choice. And I'm going to use my cosmetic wedge sponge, dip it in. I only have a little bit on here, pat it off so I don't have too much. And then I'm going to try to stay within the confines of the cup. Okay. So the stencil is doing the work of keeping it within the confines of the stencil, but I need to do the work of keeping it within the confines of the cup. Now you could, of course, do some masking so that you wouldn't have to pay so much attention to the edges, but this is a real quick and dirty kind of exercise. I'm also going to stay away from this black cup that's on top of it. I'm going to let it be on top and let this be behind. And I am going to continue down into the bottom of the cup. Then I'm going to take some of this yellow on the same sponge. So it's mixing together these two colors for the center and maybe a little bit for the bottom as well, just for a little bit of variability and around the edges and anywhere I feel like. Okay, now we don't have to take it off because we can just flip it up and say, oh, cool. I like that, right? I think it looks really cool. So I'm ready to take this off now. But I really think that the white doesn't pop off, right? Because you can't really see the edges of the cup. So I could color the cup itself, or I could do what I'm about to do, which is I'm just looking for a black pencil. I think this one's fine. And I'm just going to color around the cup. So I'm coloring inside the handle, and then I'm going to color outside the handle. It's kind of what we did here with the big piece of collage paper. And I'm not worried about running into anything else on the paper. Just having fun, playing around. The name of the game is to play and relax. Now this is a little wet, so my pencil's running into some problems there. It's just acting funny on the wet area, which is totally normal, and that's fine. Okay, now I think what I might do, already I can see, right, the shape of the cup much better. I think what I might do is push down harder to get it much darker, closer to the cup, just so that it's a little bit of an outline, nothing too aggressive. And it's still pretty loose and furry, which is a personal style thing that I like. If you don't like it, do it differently. One of the best compliments I ever have gotten is that I've had lots of students over the years who work in a different style than I do, because I don't think that you need to want to make work that looks like mine for me to be a good teacher for you. One of my special skills is that I feel like I bring out the best in people who make work that is different than me, that I can help other people towards what the kind of art they want to make. And that's a good thing to be able to say, because we shouldn't all be clones. Okay, already I like this so much more. I feel like I really see the flower. The only thing that's bugging me now is the inside of the cup. So I think what I'll do is, this is water-soluble graphite. So I'm just going to sketch it in here. Then I'm going to take a paintbrush and just make that water-soluble graphite melt a little bit into a soft gray on the inside. Okay. And so now I feel like now I've got my flowered cup, which looks really cool. Let's see. This almost now starts to look like a piece of collage. The way that it's laying on top of here is so interesting. I really like it. Now you could continue in this way. I could add some stitching. Here, for instance, the shape of the cup is kind of funky. So I can take a quick drawing here just to like solidify where some of the lines might be or should be. You could add in another little piece of white collage at the edge to round that out a little bit where it might be good. And I'm not even thinking about the stripes going in the same direction, and it certainly doesn't need to be the same piece of paper, right? I'll just glue stick this. I'll just glue stick this. Okay. So I'm going to throw that here and then maybe marker over this. And now, I'm getting an interesting cup. And all of this stuff that we're doing will inform work that I'll do later, right? All of this experimenting and playing will give me ideas to use in later work and things to try. And knowing that I can change the shape of this without a big negligible difference, even though it's collage, is like a really good empowerment tool. So we're nearing the end of our time, which is hard to believe, right? That an hour has slipped by here. But what I really want to say to you is one, I hope you'll check out both my art practice membership, see if that's right for you. And if not, check out the Map Technique Vault, which I think is awesome and packed with information. And if you want something free, then you can always check out my YouTube channel, or I have lots and lots of great videos for you. But I hope that you really enjoyed this class and that you've gotten something out of it, and that you'll be able to look at random silly things that are around your house, your studio, a plant, a shoe, in a different way, and see how it can give you lots of ideas for playing around in different ways. Because, this sheet is something you could work on for a long time and come up with lots and lots of different new ideas. So for people who are members, I'll finish this and I'll put the finished video in the classroom, and for everyone else I'll send out the replay of what we have done so far. Are there any questions? I know we moved lightning speed because we had a lot to do today, but if there are any questions, let me know. Great. Looks like everybody knows what they're doing. Okay, so I will hopefully see you in the classroom. And if not, I know you all came from the mailing list, so I'll see you on the mailing list, okay? Bye.